Hello, my name is Max Lewis. I'm a barrister at 29 Bedford Row, Chambers. And as part of our ongoing series of lectures and seminars, I'm going to be talking for about 40 to 45 minutes on cryptocurrency and divorce, and in particular, what it is and why we shouldn't be panicking about it. Because I have found that for many people, you mention the word cryptocurrency, you mention all sorts of things surrounding cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and NFT, all these kinds of things that you might read in the paper. And very quickly, it becomes very confusing. Very quickly, one's eyes glaze over. And what I'm going to try and do is to unpack what a lot of this stuff means, explain why some of it is particularly important, and why it is that we need to know about this stuff, because however new and novel this kind of stuff is now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's going to be increasingly normal. It's going to be a much bigger part of all of our financial remedy practices going into the future. And the sooner we get a grip on what it is and how it works, the better I think we can help our clients through their difficult divorces. And there are 5 things I particularly want to talk about. You will have heard, number one, you will have heard about blockchains, and it's important that we understand at least at a basic level what it is. And the simple thing to remember, as I'm going to explain to you in a bit, blocks put together with chains are blockchains, and it's no more complicated than that. I want to talk about who is using it and how they're using it. And number 3, I want to demystify what it looks like. I don't know how many of you have actually seen what a Bitcoin trade looks like. What does a screen look like when you're trying to buy or sell some of these currencies? And just to show you what it looks like and to try and demystify some of this. 4 is the biggest problem that many of us are facing at the moment. How do I find it? And how do I recover it if somebody's taken money, invested it into Bitcoin, and I don't know where it's gone? And then 5, what I think is perhaps the most important part of all of this, what's going to happen when all of this is normal? How is it going to change our view about financial remedies, about what the court can and can't do when it comes to dividing up assets in divorce? Now, I said earlier that the key to understanding all of this is to understand what a blockchain is. And to understand that, you have to think about traditional banking security. How do banks historically keep their customers' stuff secure? They lock it away in a vault, and they make sure that nobody who isn't authorized is able to see it. Banks in this country, it's for banks all over the world. Traditionally, they have all operated on the very strict basis that you maintain security by ensuring there are no prying eyes. Now, what a cryptocurrency does, what a blockchain does, is turn that idea of security and privacy completely on its head. You have to think about individual blocks of data, individual little books, individual little piece of paper. Each of them contain bits of information, and they're all chained up together. And that chaining together of these blocks of information make up a blockchain. Now, these individual blocks of data are all public. You have to imagine they're all put onto a public notice board, because what happens is all of the transactions are public. Everybody sees what everybody else is doing. The identities and the usernames are all private. You know that user number 153 has taken £100 and turned it into Bitcoin. That transaction is visible, and everybody can see that everything that everybody else was doing. And you get the security for all of this from the fact that if anybody tries to tamper with any of it, if anybody tries to go in and secretly adjust and secretly give themselves £1 million, if anybody tries to do that, everybody else will see, and it won't be allowed to happen. The system won't allow it to be changed unilaterally. And that's what makes it all secure. It's not that it's being hidden away in a vault underneath a Swiss mountain. It's that it's all out for display and everybody can see exactly what's going on, except for the fact that nobody knows who is who. All of the trades are anonymous. You don't know who's bought, who's sold, but you know that user A has sold to user B, and everybody in the world knows that user A has sold to user B. And that's why this blockchain thing is so revolutionary. It's a completely different way of looking at security by making everything public rather than by making everything private. Now, once you've understood that basic idea that these blocks of data sewn together and all made public, that's what this cryptocurrency essentially is. It's just data that everybody can see. It's important to understand that each of these different currencies, and we're going to hear there's something called Bitcoin, there's something called Ethereum, there's something called Tether. Each of these individual currencies works in a slightly different way. Some are faster than others, and for some people that matters a great deal. Some have extra bells and whistles on top that other ones don't have, but they all work on this basic idea of blocks of information chained together that are all made public for everybody to see. There are currently over 10,000 individual blockchains, 10,000 individual cryptocurrencies. The top 5, and you've probably heard of most of these, Bitcoin by a long way is the most popular. And then it's something called Ethereum, which came along a few years later. And Ethereum works in a very different way and offers something very different, or something very additional to what Bitcoin offers. There's a currency called Tether, which is pegged to the US dollar. Anybody who's ever done any work in the Caribbean will know that the East Caribbean dollar is pegged at a fixed rate to the US dollar. A lot of the weaker currencies in the world peg themselves, for good or for ill, to the currencies of other countries. And Tether is a cryptocurrency. One Tether will always be worth $1. You could just use it in a slightly different way than you can use a cash dollar bill that you've got stuck in your pocket. There's Binance, again, it does something different, and a US dollar coin. These are the top 5 by popularity. The important thing, though, is that these blocks of data that make up this chain of things that are tied together and made public, don't need to refer to cash. You can record any kind of data you want in these individual bits of blocks of data. And so long as you have the right keys, and we're going to talk about how you access these blocks of data using keys, so long as you're able to access it, you can have whatever data you want. So think about things like medical records or business information, things that you want to keep private and secure, but things that you want to be able to access from wherever you are in the world. Now, some of you will have heard of this recent trend for what are called NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. People are paying silly amounts of money for these NFTs. And the reason is that once you have an electronic asset, you can use the blockchain to make sure that you always have a complete grip on what is the original document. A good example might be, imagine that J.K. Rowling and one of her Harry Potter books had been typed out by her on her laptop. And J.K. Rowling gets hold of the original Word document from her laptop that's got perhaps her track changes on it, and it's got the comments from the editor. You can imagine that Word document, the original version of that Word document, the first edition, the very first thing, the thing that she actually worked on, might be of value to some crazy Harry Potter fan. What this blockchain allows you to do is to put that electronic asset onto a chain of data to make sure that it's absolutely unique and it can't be tampered with, and everybody knows that that's the original one. That is the one that J.K. Rowling actually worked on. And once you're able to guarantee that authenticity, you know this is the actual Word document. There will be somebody who will pay money to have the privilege of saying, I have got the original Word document. Of course it can be copied. Of course it can be copied very easily. Certainly, cut and paste on a Windows program very easily. But if you can absolutely guarantee that you've got the original unchanged one, that might be of value to something. That's all one of these non-fungible tokens is. It's an electronic marker on something that says, this is the original document, nobody can change it, and we are guaranteed that that although there may be copies of it out there in the world, although people may want to take copies of it, this is the original, and that's why it's valuable. Now, some of you may have heard about something called mining. And the reason that mining is important, I'm not going to go into this because this in too much detail, because it does get very technical very quickly. The important thing to understand about mining is that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are desperate to avoid the problem that affected the German government in the 1920s and 1930s, which is that if you run out of money, all you have to do is print more money, and then you've got more money. But as we know, what that leads to is massive rampant hyperinflation and international war. Bitcoin specifically avoids doing that by limiting the amount of Bitcoins that can ever be made. Bitcoins aren't made in the way that you might make pound coins or 50-pound notes. They're not made. The way it works is that the computers need, in order to chain these blocks of data together, there need to be these chains, these links that safely and securely tie these blocks of data together in a way that means that if it's changed for one person, it's changed for everybody, and that's the way they guarantee the security. To follow a perhaps poorly chosen war metaphor, think about the way that the Enigma code breakers worked in Bletchley Park in the 1940s. They used hugely complicated maths to try and crack codes, and were eventually successful. And mining is the flip side of that process. You're trying to create really complicated, unbreakable codes so that you can securely use those codes as a way of locking together these bits of data. Now, this will come as a surprise to many. This is a hugely electricity and energy intensive thing to do. These are ridiculously complicated mathematical puzzles to try and protect the security through this use of cryptography. To the extent that if your computer is the one that solves one of these equations that allows these blocks of data to be linked together securely, Bitcoin will pay you approximately 200,000 sterling for solving a mathematical puzzle. So there is an enormous incentive on people to do that. Now, the chances of actually being the one that cracks it is infinitesimally small. And so there are huge amounts of computers all working together at the same time to try and solve these puzzles so that Bitcoin, in the same breath, is allowed, one, to become more secure, and two, for a controlled amount of currency ever to be released. And when I say it's using a huge amount of electricity, studies show 0.5% of all electricity used in the world on anything is used on the process of mining Bitcoin. A study I read the other day told me, and I have no reason to disbelieve this, that the process of mining Bitcoin, the process of solving these puzzles, making it more secure, limiting the supply, that process uses more energy than the entire energy use of Argentina. It's a huge enterprise. And as people get more energy aware, because as people begin to realize that actually huge amounts of fossil fuels are being burned to power these computers, there is going to be, at some point in the future, I think, a change in the way this all happens, because it is so hugely intensive. But you may find that some of your clients are joining groups of people working together to try and mine for some of these puzzles. Now, hopefully, you know what it is that they're doing. Some stats. 2 bits of information published as at the end of March that show 2 quite differently interesting things. The first On the left, the top 5 countries by cryptocurrency usage. By a long way, the country with the largest number of people using Bitcoin is India, with over 100 million people in that country using it. Somewhere like 4 times as many people in India as in America are using cryptocurrency. The next is Nigeria. Vietnam has an enormous number of people using it, and the UK comes 5th. On the right, the top 5 countries by population percentage. Obviously, there are a billion or so people in India, and therefore it's a proportionally smaller amount of people perhaps than are using it in other parts of the world. But as at the end of March, and perhaps because of what's happening in the Ukraine, Ukraine had the highest percentage of its population using cryptocurrency, followed by Russia, followed by Venezuela. Singapore, put to one side for a minute, but look at those top 3 countries, Ukraine, Russia, Venezuela. All of these 3 countries are in some sort of, if not economic difficulty, where relying on your own central state bank to govern your financial security in the way that we do with the Bank of England in England. Where that's not available, people are moving into these crypto online assets. And so it's not immediately clear whether going forward, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are going to be simply about chasing the next big easy buck, or whether there is a link between volatility out there in the world and economic difficulty out there in the world and a desire to have a fluid and usable and internationally exchangeable currency. So we need to think about this not as highly, perhaps as it was 5-6 years ago, very highly educated economics graduates who understood the maths and who are using this as some kind of exotic, esoteric way of making money. It's becoming much more normalized in places in the world where there is a real need for financial fluidity. With that in mind, how does it work and how do you use it? A couple of ideas we need to deal with. The first, it's important to understand what people dealing with cryptocurrency refer to as wallets. And wallets contain keys, and there are 2 important keys. The first key, what's known as a private key, allows you to link to that bit of data on one of these blocks that refers to the money that you've put there. So there's the private key. Nobody else in the world could have this. It's a long bit of code, and this is the bit that says this is your link to that particular transaction that says on the 15th of March, whenever it is, Max bought £100 worth of Bitcoin. That's recorded on one of these blocks of data, and the private key allows me access to that. Then there's a separate public key, and this public key is what I send out to somebody, and I say, I'm going to give you some of my cryptocurrency, and here is the public coin that allows a public key that allows that transaction to take place. Now, that public key, again, visible to the whole world, and once that public key and that private key are mixed together and work together, then authority is given to change something on that public notice, or something on that public block of data changes and records that there has been a movement of assets from one person to another person. You need both keys to be able to do that. You also need to understand what an exchange is. Think of an exchange as a currency changing service like you used to get in the post office, or you occasionally get at the airport. You give them one currency, they'll give you another currency. You give them sterling, they'll give you Bitcoin, and vice versa. And it's usually those exchanges, those people who are actually managing the transfer of currencies from one to another, are those who are hosting these wallets. Now, most wallets are apps or other sorts of programs. And if you want to buy cryptocurrency, and if you want to see whether or not your client or your client's ex has shifted money into cryptocurrency, they will need to have downloaded an app or got hold of a wallet. And most importantly, they will have needed to put what I've called normal currency into it. And that's the really important point. If you have a copy of these notes with you, put a circle around upload normal currency, because that's going to be the place where you start looking if somebody has hidden money in Bitcoin. Because to hide money in Bitcoin, you first got to convert it into Bitcoin. And uploading your normal currency, what is known in the cryptocurrency world as fiat, F-I-A-T, fiat currency, old-fashioned currency, published and printed by banks around the world. That's the most important place to look. The wallet provider then gives you the cryptocurrency and generates the keys. And to transfer cryptocurrency, if I want to send 100 Bitcoin to my brother, all I've got to do is I've got my wallet address, I've got my wallet, I need to know the email address or the code for their wallet. And if all those keys check out, the whole blockchain, everybody in the world will see that they won't know it's me, but user A has transferred 100 Bitcoin to user B. The second thing to circle if you have these notes, whoever has the keys controls the funds. The security of the wallet is critical. People that have been hacked, people that have lost Bitcoin or lost cryptocurrency have lost it because their wallet was hacked. And if you've got access to the keys and you've got access to the app, to the mobile phone, to the computer, whatever it is, you can enforce because you have access to the wallet. For different kinds of wallet. Most people, most but not all, will have what I've called an app-based wallet, much in the same way, and you'll see in a minute, much in the same way as you might have an online banking app on your phone. It looks exactly like that. You might have a self-custody wallet. This is a bit more exotic. You get the keys. There's no app-based wallet. You have to do everything yourself by hand rather than working through an app. Sometimes what you get is literally a piece of paper with a code on it, and the only place in the world that code is located is on that piece of paper. You see, if you've got a wallet through your app, much in the same way that if you've got money in the bank and you use an online banking app, if I lose my phone or my computer, or my kid spills coffee on my computer, I can still access my money. I just got to find a different way of logging into the same app, right? If, however, the only place in the world that this code, these keys are written down is on that piece of paper that I keep myself, I've lost that Bitcoin and I can never, ever get it back. The third way is what is called a hardware wallet. This is, again, quite esoteric. Barclays had something similar when you used to have some physical little object that you needed to press a button into to access your online banking, and they got rid of it because it was annoying. But a variety of different keys. It might look like a little USB drive or something else, and all of the data with all of your keys is stored on this particular object. It's stored nowhere else in the world apart from on this object. Nobody has a copy of it. Nobody is able to hack into it because it's just contained on this little thing. And again, if you lose that little thing, then it is impossible to recover whatever Bitcoin you could only access through that wallet. I'm going to come back to later on, but it's worth thinking about now, is how you hand over wallets from one person to another. That becomes quite a big problem later on. So what does it look like? Well, a couple of weeks ago, when I agreed to give this talk, I wanted to find out how it worked so I could show you what the process looked like. And I did that by taking £100 and investing it into cryptocurrency. And I did it on one of the exchanges called Coinbase. Again, I'm not advertising for them. I happen to use them. And I put 100 quid on it, and I wanted to see what happened. And as you can see, although I put it on slightly before the beginning of this chart, over the last couple of weeks, I've lost a bit of money. It went up to, I think, £120, my original £100. It's now down to £101. So I've made a bit of money, I've lost a bit. And you'll see that I've got £46 in Bitcoin, I've got £23 in Litecoin, £11 in Ethereum, and various other smaller amounts in other small countries. That's what the sort of thing that you would expect to see if somebody has Bitcoin is a piece of paper or a screen like this that breaks down their holdings currency by currency. Now, the next thing you'll notice on an app is that you'll generally have three choices of things you can do. You can buy on the left, you can sell in the middle, and you can convert on the right. And I put a little arrow where it says this is the important part. If I want to buy £10 of a cryptocurrency, I've got to get my bank account to give £10 to the wallet provider so they can exchange it for me. In much the same way as when I go to a currency exchange place on holiday, I've actually got to give them sterling before they give me whatever currency I want to convert into. And that's and that transaction, that movement of funds from current account to wallet will flag on somebody's bank statement. There are Bitcoin ATMs, which are a different problem. You can do it by putting cash in. But for now, for most people, they will put cash in and convert it. And that's the first thing you're looking for, is the initial transaction into a cryptocurrency. And I can do a one-time purchase. I can put in a certain amount of money every week. I can do whatever I want to do in relation to that. When I want to sell, I choose, well, which of my currencies am I going to sell and where do I want to put it? Do I want to put it in I could put it into a sterling wallet here, but actually other options include a euro wallet or other various different ways I can do it. Or if I want to convert currency, simple as saying how much I want to convert, from which of the currencies I want to convert it from, and which of the currencies do I want to convert it to. It's really simple. It's really easy to operate once you're in there. If somebody is moving money around wrongly, then these are the sorts of things that you ought to be tracking. But actually, increasingly, people are going to be moving money around for perfectly legitimate reasons. And there's nothing inherently dodgy or suspicious in this. You just need to feel comfortable with knowing what you're looking at. And if I want to, now what the screen that you're looking at now is about me buying, me selling, and me converting. But if I want to send or receive on the particular wallet that I've used, others will look similar to this. You say on the left, right, how much Bitcoin do I want to pay with? Who do I want to send it to? Do I want to send a note saying, thank you very much for a lovely weekend, here's my share of the hotel bill. Click continue, and as long as the money is all there, it will go across pretty quickly. That's to send it. If I want to receive it, obviously I've got to give somebody my email address, or I've got to give somebody my details. So I send them the screen on the right, that little QR code that you can see there, or I give them an address. Once they've got that, they can send their money to me, and the transaction will be completed very, very quickly. So that's a whistle-stop tour of how Bitcoin works, how cryptocurrency works. I appreciate we've gone through it at a bit of a canter, but I will make sure that these notes are available if anybody wants to see them. And as I say at the very end of this talk, if you want to get in touch or have some further resources, then I'm more than happy to speak about particular issues that have come up in particular cases that anybody watching has dealt with. But it's time to turn to some of the legal analysis out of this. First question, what does English law make of all this? What is Bitcoin? What is it? Is it a right to something? It's not a physical something. You can't touch it, you can't feel it, you can't put it in your pocket. It's difficult to assign, it's difficult to move. People were thinking about this for a long time until in a case called AA and Persons Unknown, 2019, an insurance company had been, you may remember, an insurance company was hacked, and they were told that unless they paid a ransom of $950,000, they wouldn't get their data back. There was a spate of this happening a couple of years ago. This was one of those cases. And Brian Jay in the commercial court was very, very clear that so far as they were concerned, this was property. And the importance about declaring that cryptocurrency is property is that you can buy it, you can sell it in law, you can own it, you can steal it, so that crimes are capable in relation to Bitcoin. You can physically, you can steal something, but also you can make a freezing injunction against the property. As we're going to see, you can have what's called a Norwich Pharmacal order. There are going to be problems with service. There are going to be problems with enforcement. None of those problems are new. It's always been difficult to serve foreign banks and get foreign banks to do very much. It's going to be, it can often be difficult to serve foreign wallet holders, foreign crypto exchanges for the same reason. But the important thing for divorce purposes is that if crypto assets are property, they could be subject to property adjustment orders. And remember, so far as English matrimonial law is concerned, we make orders against people rather than against things. The order made at the end of a divorce is you must pay money, or you must transfer this asset to that person. It doesn't say this asset now belongs to that person. That would be unenforceable, particularly if the asset was overseas, particularly if it's foreign land. There's a whole bunch of law about that kind of thing. But what English law says is that you must take steps to transfer your interest in this bit of property to that person. And ultimately, if they don't comply, you can enforce in the usual way, right up to sticking them into prison for contempt of court. I'm going to take it as read that everybody here understands how Matrimonial Causes Act Section 37 works, but Norwich Pharmacal orders and Bankers' Trusts orders are a bit more esoteric so far as family lawyers are concerned. Norwich Pharmacal orders are all about innocent people who get mixed up in other people's wrongdoing. If something wrong has taken place and you've got a good reason to believe that you know who the ultimate wrongdoer is or who might have information about them, then if a third party's got mixed up on it, you could make an order against that third party, even if they're completely innocent. That occasionally happens. In fact, I had a case a year or so ago where there was a concern about whether somebody had hacked into somebody else's email account. And we got a Norwich Pharmacal order against the email provider, against Google or whoever it was, and said, even though we're not alleging that you, email provider, have done anything wrong, you have the information to tell us who did. You can tell us what the IP address, where somebody was located, what their login name is. Can you give us that, please? And that's what a Norwich Pharmacal order is. You get those kinds of orders and they'll give you the information. Bankers' Trust orders are slightly different, but also have quite a lot in common, although they are technically different. If there has been a fraud and a good, clear case of fraud, and you have a good suspicion, good, solid basis of believing that some of that fraudulent money has ended up at a particular bank, then you can get an order specific to the bank and require the bank to let you know the information that you need to identify the location or preservation, to identify the person who ultimately holds the money so that you can identify or preserve the assets. Recent case last year, Mr. Dollar Bill and persons unknown, it's always persons unknown because they're always hiding away overseas. The court made both kinds of orders against exchanges that were hosted abroad so that we know who held the ultimate end wallet. And remember, we talked about earlier on, the transfer of money, the transfer of funds through over the blockchain, through these individual bits of data, happens because people have the keys that allow you to say this bit of electronic data now belongs to this person rather than to that person. But if Bitcoin or other these cryptocurrencies are always going to be held in a wallet by somewhere, they're going to be held by someone. And if you've got a reasonable suspicion that you know who would have that information, the English court has shown itself willing to help. And again, the thing to remember as well is that because all of these transactions are publicly available, once you see the entry point, once you see the initial conversion from, say, sterling to Bitcoin, you can track it all the way into an end wallet. Now, this can be an expensive process. It's data intensive, it's time consuming. And if anybody is interested in how it works or have a case where that might be involved, and again, I'm not advertising these people at all, but at the bottom of this slide, you'll see four particular companies, four reputable companies, if I may say so, who do offer that service. Some of them make it quite clear that unless you're searching for more than £50,000 worth of Bitcoin, it's really not worth the time and the effort because it is really very intensive. But if, as sometimes happens, huge amounts of money have been lost, then there are companies out there that can track it. Now, what you will get is the information about where what's called the end wallet is, who is holding or where the keys are likely to be. It doesn't necessarily make it recoverable, because if it has found its way under the control of somebody in a jurisdiction that's going to ignore English law, you may end up being stuck. So be careful, there is a limit to what these people can achieve for you. But if it has found its way either into the husband's best friends who is just hiding it in the equivalent way that he's hiding under the sofa, or it's gone to a cousin of the wife who's going to look after it, or whatever it is, and they are amenable to the jurisdiction of the English court, and you can prove that link through these companies, then you're able to secure orders against them. An English court, I think, will try and help. But I think it's important for us all to think beyond this idea that cryptocurrency represents something inherently dodgy. And I've put up on this slide a list of things that I think in the future we ought to need to think about in terms of how issues of cryptocurrency are going to affect our practice as divorce lawyers. First and most obvious, property adjustment orders. It is perfectly possible to get an order that says, you, Mr. Bloggs, transfer 15 Bitcoin to you, Mrs. Smith. Even if that is an asset which has been located abroad, we've had that since Hamlin in 1986. The fact that an asset is abroad is no problem because we're making orders against people rather than things. Think about what happens if a spouse is trading with Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency assets and makes losses or profits prior to a divorce. If there's been a long period of separation where a husband, say, has been trading with cryptocurrency and has made or lost money, he's been doing that with assets that were, as sometimes I'll describe, the undivided share of the other spouse has been used in all of that. So we need to think about that. That's not specific to cryptocurrency. That's with any kind of speculation or any kind of investment strategy where there's a sharing claim, but a delay before it's all thought about. Again, think about what happens about losses after divorce. We all remember in the financial crash of 07, 08, the credit crunch, when we thought the credit crunch was the worst thing that might possibly happen in the world, we had Meissen. And poor old Mr. Meissen was told, all right, you kept your shares because you were comfortable taking the risk of having those shares. When those shares go south, don't come back and complain that you haven't got any money anymore. You went into that with your eyes open. Now, when you're balancing off risk and thinking about what the fairness of what people are left with, that kind of analysis is going to become, I think, more and more prevalent in later variation cases, for the divorces that we're going to be doing in 5 years' time, that are going to come back for variations 5 years after that. We're going to be thinking a lot about Meissen and about that kind of process. Again, Wells and Wells. A pound of cash under the mattress is not the same as a pound's worth of Bitcoin on your phone or on your laptop. So think about risk sharing in terms of Wells and Wells. liquidity. The important thing about cryptocurrency is that it is, by and large, more liquid, I think, even than cash. If I've got money in the bank, I've got to go to the bank, who may make me sign some forms, or who may, depending on the size of the transaction, may make me go through a couple of steps before I transfer funds wherever I want to. If I've got Bitcoin or other sorts of cryptocurrency, it may be that at the touch of a button, I can make a payment even quicker than I can through the regular banking system. So sometimes cryptocurrency is even more liquid. There was an article in the Family Law Journal last year which reported a legal services payment order made by way of cryptocurrency. You, Mr. Bloggs, must pay by way of a LASPO order 2 Bitcoin to Mrs. Bloggs for the purposes of enabling her to pay for proceedings. And the way the article reports itself is by saying that actually it was an entirely unexceptional case. It was just that the husband in that case had no cash, but a bunch of Bitcoin. And there was no good reason why if you could make an order in a foreign currency, why can't you make an order in a cryptocurrency? Again, just as a couple of other random bits of things that are worth thinking about, if somebody does have a large amount of cryptocurrency, the child support rules were changed in 2018, specifically to include holding crypto assets as a justification for varying an assessment on the basis of the assets that you've got. If you're holding a huge amount of money in cryptocurrency, that alone is the basis for a CMS variation. See the two cases. As I said earlier on, you can pay, you've always been able to pay orders. Well, the court has always been able to make orders allowing people to pay or requiring to pay in foreign currency. Ex parte Ireland was the big one. But again, if you're arbitrating, there is specifically the power under the Arbitration Act to require that to happen. The last one, which is worth thinking about, how you pass crypto assets under a will. This will be an increasing area to have to think about, because again, if you remember what I said early on, whoever has the wallet, whoever's holding the keys, has access to the funds. If you lose that wallet and you can't get access to your keys, your Bitcoin or your crypto is lost. Now, some of you will have come across a story. I first saw it about 6 months ago about a man who threw out a computer in 2013. He was upgrading, he threw out his hard drive. And fast forward a couple of years, he realizes that on that computer, he had a bunch of things called Bitcoin, which at the time he hadn't really paid very much attention to. But given the explosion in the value of Bitcoin by many, many thousands of percent, he calculated that there was in a landfill site somewhere in Newport in South Wales, a hard drive containing the keys to Bitcoin worth £300 million. This man has spent months, probably years now, raking through a landfill site in Newport in South Wales to try and find this laptop. He is offering to pay people millions of pounds as a reward if they help him and they find this computer. But because the only keys to that Bitcoin were on his computer, because that computer, so far as he is aware, was taken up by the rubbish and put in a landfill many, many years ago, if he can't get hold of that computer and recover that hard drive, he will not be able to access £300 million, which is technically belonging to him. And with that in mind, if you are advising clients on making wills, think about the process of ensuring safe and secure passage of the wallet. That might simply mean depositing the relevant login codes with the solicitor as part of the probate file. But you'll need to think practically about how you do that. Because as I say, if you can't log in, you can't get hold of any money. 2 or 3 final things before I wrap up. First, everybody seems to have forgotten that actually cryptocurrency is taxable. And I'm not going to talk about this in any length, but the revenue have caught on to the idea that if you're making profits measured in the thousands of percents, there ought to be a capital gain, which they can tax. There is a manual specifically dealing with cryptocurrency, which you'll see a reference to about halfway down this slide. If I take £100 of cash and I convert it into £100 of worth of Bitcoin, then I haven't made anything, I haven't lost anything, because my base cost is 100 quid. If that Bitcoin then doubles in money overnight, then I have made a capital gain. I have to pay tax on my gain when I dispose of it. And the disposal of a cryptocurrency takes place when you convert it back to cash. And this is the important bit: if you exchange it for another type of cryptocurrency. And that's really important. People are getting slightly caught out by that. If I take £10 and buy some Bitcoin, and that turns into £20 worth of Bitcoin, and I decide actually I want to change it to £20 worth of some other currency, I've made a disposal at that stage, and I'm liable to pay tax on that gain because I've converted it from one sort of asset to another. Again, gifts between spouses and civil partners are exempt, and I've got no reason to believe that the rule would be any different in relation to the year of separation rule that has so plagued us when we think about shares in companies and transferring land. The final point I want to make, again, about this idea about whether cryptocurrencies are inherently reckless or inherently dodgy, is what do you do with the person who invests a huge amount of money in cryptocurrency and loses it? Is that wanton and reckless conduct for the purposes of an add back or some other finding within divorce proceedings? Short answer is it all depends on the intention of the person that's doing it. People lose money in well-intentioned business ideas all the time. That doesn't make it reckless, and it certainly doesn't make it wanton. Back in the 70s, we had Martin and Martin making it quite clear that if you can't fritter away money by reckless speculation, is the phrase, and then claim as great a share as what you would have had otherwise. And Norris, and this is said in many other cases, Norris, some people, if you take risks, some pay off, others don't. The fact that you can't, perhaps if something hasn't quite taken off or it's bombed and you can't put a value on it now, that fact alone does not make it a reckless or wanton investment. Sometimes you have to take the rough with the smooth. And a very good example of all of this, and I apologize immediately in advance for the huge block of text here. I'm not going to read out to you in total, but it's worth you having a look at it when you get some time after this talk. AP and ALP, a couple of years ago, didn't involve cryptocurrency at all. It involved a man who had made various speculative investments. He was a Russian investing in various Russian industries, and he made a lot of money in some novel ways. And then, in spite of the fact that his wife said, actually, I don't think you should be investing in this, he went ahead and did it, and the whole thing bombed, and he lost a huge amount of money. The parties, as Mr. Justice Moore said, they ought to have been financially comfortable, but actually this investment had pretty much wiped them out. That isn't enough to justify a finding of willful dissipation. You'll see at the very bottom paragraph, you can't take advantage of somebody's entrepreneurial skills to share in things that work and avoid any liability for things that don't come good. Now, one of the things that happened in this particular case is that the wife, Mrs. AP, Mrs. ALP, was saying, well, I specifically counseled him not to do this. I told him that this was a terrible idea, and he went ahead and did it anyway. But what Mr. Justice Moore said, well, that's not enough. Unless he went into it either completely negligently or intending willfully to dissipate money, the fact that he took a well-intentioned punt and lost Unfortunately, that is the way of the world. We're not going to add that back, and it takes a great deal more to prove that somebody has attempted to frustrate the divorce process in this way. Many of you will remember a case back from the 1980s called Kemmis, K-E-M-M-I-S, that talked about what sort of intention you need to have for the purpose of Section 37. You know, can you say, if you shifted away, you bought yourself a Ferrari, given it to your girlfriend in the middle of divorce proceedings, can you say, well, I didn't intend to frustrate my wife's claims. I intended to give a Ferrari to my girlfriend and, you know, make her happy. That was my intention. I didn't intend to frustrate my wife's claims by taking £100,000 out of the family economy. And the Court of Appeal said, no, we're not having that. So long as it is a substantial part of what you knew was inevitably going to happen, and a part of your thinking that it was going to frustrate or reduce, then that is enough to justify a Section 37. And so long as it's would have to be, by analogy here, a substantial part of your thinking to try and either take a scorched earth policy and blow a hole in your finances, or to frustrate any claim for financial remedy work. If you can show either of those two things, the court might be interested. But if somebody, well-intentioned, makes an investment and it goes wrong, that won't be enough to justify an add back for the purposes of divorce proceedings. So there we are. A whistle-stop tour through the relevant issues in relation to cryptocurrency. Thank you very much for listening. Please do feel free to get in contact with me at the email address on the screen. And if you wish, I'm happy to email you a copy of my notes that you've seen on the screen through PowerPoint. So thank you very much for listening.